Hello everyone. So this week we're beginning to talk about the Outlook software. And really when it comes to using Outlook itself, the content in the Cengage material really does a good job at walking you through how to do everything with Outlook. So for the weekly videos, I'm going to try to avoid talking directly about Outlook itself, and I'm going to try to cover some tangential topics in dealing with the thing that Outlook does, which is email. And that's what I'm going to be doing for the weekly videos for the next few weeks with Outlook, Word, and Excel. So what I want to look at in this week's video are the components of effective email. And I think that's important for everybody to understand as we're, kind of in this world where email is an accepted communication tool. Everybody uses email these days to communicate. We're not even using phone calls as much, and as we once were, everything's communicated via some kind of email, especially in the business world. I know I receive a whole ton of emails every day of varying usefulness. I'll even give you a quick peek at my email, but not too long. Oh, that's all you get. So as we talk about the components of an effective email, let's talk about how we communicate via email and what we can do to make our email communications more effective and more professional. So the first of all is subject lines. And I've got a lot of text here, but I'll explain it as we kind of go through. So email subject lines, they're like newspaper headlines. If you even know what a newspaper is, or, a post title. For somebody who, new digital age. This is the, your email subject line is, what you want to kind of be the main point of the email that you sent your reader. So this is the big idea or the big picture that, your reader is about to open up and they're about to read this information that you've sent them. So you want to be as specific as possible. So oftentimes we're really, we're tempted because we're in a hurry to, be really vague in our subject line. And we just put like hi or question or something else that's really just kind of vague, that doesn't really tell much about what's going on inside the email. But then that's not informative, and it doesn't really give the reader an idea of how important your message is. So when you're thinking about writing a subject line for your email, what you're really doing is you're being considerate of your reader. This is your reader's first opportunity to kind of gauge what your email is about and how your email fits into their day. Is this something that needs to be answered right away? Is this time sensitive? And in doing so, you're also helping yourself. Because if your message is time sensitive, and you include something like a date that lets the reader know right up front, this message is time sensitive, I need to answer on this right away, then not only do they know that they need to work it into their day as soon as possible so that, they can get you an answer, but you're able to get an answer as soon as possible because you formatted a good subject line. So that's something that's important. If your message is time sensitive, you might want to include a date in the subject line. So if you want to get a meeting with somebody, like, oh, let's have a meeting on Uh, Thursday, April the whatever. So when you think about the subject of the email lines that you receive, I want you to think about the following questions. Which subject lines are the most effective? And why? Now, there's to some degree, there's a bit of curiosity when you get a vague subject line in your email inbox, but more so than not, really, that's kind of just an annoyance that's just going to plague our day. If you just get a vague email subject line in your inbox and you open it up and it just turns out to be junk and you just wasted your time on nothing, then you know how you feel when you experience that. So especially when you enter the business world and you're writing important emails that need to get information returned to you about a certain topic or a certain business critical element, the subject line then becomes important. So think about that question as you're working through your work this week. Another thing is greetings and sign-offs. And again, there's a ton of text here, but we'll just talk through it. So you always want to use some kind of greeting and sign-off. It's the professional thing to do. If you've got a rapport with the individual, if they're your friend or if you know them, you can kind of, on a different level, you can kind of omit this stuff. But especially if there's somebody you don't know very well or someone who is like your boss or your professor or someone of that nature, you want to address them in a professional manner and, kind of keep this whole thing professional as you start your email to them. It's just a standard professional practice. And sometimes it can be kind of confusing about how you address somebody or how you sign off. And we'll talk a little more about all the different ways we can do that. But it's always better to make some kind of effort and maybe be a little weird about it, than just kind of going directly into your message. Because, it's just kind of abrupt. It's kind of rude. You kind of think about it in terms of how somebody would come up to you and talk to you in real life. Would you rather somebody just come up to you and tell you what they need and leave? Or would you rather somebody come up to you and say, hi, how are you? Look, here's what I have going on. Can you help us with this? All right, thank you, goodbye. It's just pleasantries that are polite and professional and, keep you in a good standard there. So I have some common ways here that you address your reader. Dear Professor Smith, hello, Miss McMahon, hi, Mary Jane. And, this all varies based on how familiar you are with the person that you're addressing. You wouldn't want to address your boss in the same way that you would address your best friend. Different power dynamic, different boundaries, different things going on there. So you kind of want to keep the different relationships different in terms of the way you address them. And then another instance in which you might not know the name of the person you are addressing, or if the email address delivers to a diverse group, you can try something that's generic yet polite. Something like, to whom it may concern, dear members of the selection committee, or just something like hello everyone. And that just kind of covers your bases as to all of the people that you're emailing and greets them all and gets all of that out of the way. And so your closing in kind is also extremely important because it lets the reader know who is contacting them. So you want to always sign off with your name at the end of your email, especially if the reader doesn't know you well, or if you don't know the reader well. You might also want to consider including your title and the organization you belong to, just so they can kind of put two and two together and be like, oh, that's John Smith from the factory company. I remember him when I met him at the conference we went to a couple weeks ago. Some people have decent memories in general, but sometimes they need that little extra spark to remember who you are. So if you don't really know them that well, or if you think they might not remember you, including a little extra information about yourself can be helpful in your email. So always remember to include your greetings and your sign-offs to write an effective email. Now here's an example of an email that I have here that has, essentially it's a good email. It kind of hits all the big things that we're looking for when we're writing an effective email. The only thing that I would say about this email in particular is that it might be a little long, but it also looks like it has a lot of information that it needs to get across, so that's fine. But right up front, it has the subject line, billing refund, account ID, and gives an account ID number. This is a fake email, by the way, just so if any of you saw it initially and started to panic, don't worry about it. So right there, it states the purpose of the email and gives the reader some information that's related to the email right up front so they know what's going on, and that's great. And then as we get into the email, we start to see, we have a greeting to whom it may concern. So they don't know the person that they're addressing. They, don't know who's on the other end of this email address. It is just a generic info@newexample.com email address. So you wouldn't necessarily know who's on the other side of that. So to whom it may concern is a great greeting here. And then they just get right to business, talking about I'm writing to the request that make-believe company refund the $200 fee that was wrongfully applied to my account, so on and so forth. And then finally at the end, they have the closing, sincerely, J.A. Cupid, Ph.D. And so when we're writing an email, this is kind of a good model that we can use to kind of think about how we can write an effective email. So, sincerely, and the things that we looked at previously, they're formal closings. These are some informal closings. So, you want to close your email, but you don't necessarily want to, address everyone formally, and you don't want to close all of your emails formally. So you can use informal closings. Informal closings are like thank you, best wishes, see you tomorrow, regards. One of my favorite ones that I use for everything is pretty much just thanks. And it works really good. It's just an informal thanks. Much more laid back than thank you for your time and attention to this matter. So it's informal, but it's still polite. And so that's why we can address these things on a case-by-case basis based on who we're sending an email to. And, it's important, to kind of have these structures in place as we're considering what we do. In contrast, here are some formal closings. Sincerely, respectfully yours. So if it's somebody different, if it's your boss or a potential boss, or maybe a professor or that you don't know very well, something of that nature. You might want to use a formal closing to get your point across, just to be more professional. But again, it all depends on who the person is, how well you know them, and in what capacity or in what situation you know that person. So I have this diagram here, and it's kind of a, to some degree, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. But it's kind of plotting the familiarity or the different types of closings as in regards to their casualness or their formality. Because, they're all really, they all really have different levels of formality. You see, my favorite thanks is right there in the middle as a completely neutral closing line. Whereas some of the more familiar email closing lines where you would have more familiar relationships with someone, you have things like love and with love and later, and those are things that you'd have with like your friends and your family. And then, more of the unfamiliar closing lines are sincerely and best regards and all the best and thank you and sincerely. And, those are the more professional types of closing lines that you'd want to use, because in general, you don't really want to deal with things that are too familiar in general in a professional setting. That's just kind of how it works. So this is just kind of a little chart to think about as you think about how you want to close your emails. So just kind of take a mental picture of this and remember it as you're writing emails. Now, something to address as we talk about emails a little more are the CC and BCC fields in your email. CC stands for carbon copy. BCC stands for blind carbon copy. And so with these two elements, there's a little bit of etiquette to how you use carbon copy and blind carbon copy. And so I figured it would be a good time to talk about how we use these things. So copying individuals on email, as it says here, is a good way to send your message to the main recipient while also sending someone else a copy at the same time. So this can be useful if you want to convey the exact same message to more than one person. But you also want to be aware that when you send a message to more than one address using the CC field, both the original recipient and all the recipients of the carbon copies can see all the email addresses in the to and CC fields. Each person who receives the message will be able to see the addresses of everyone else who received it. So in the professional world, sometimes you want to send an email to somebody to, tell them something, and you also might want to loop in their boss just so that their boss knows that this person has been informed about X, Y, or Z, or, whatever's going on. So you might put the main person in the to field and their boss in the CC field. And so that's kind of the purpose of the carbon copy. On the other hand, blind copying or blind carbon copying emails to a group of people can be useful when you don't want everybody on the list to have each other's email addresses. The only recipient address that will be visible to all recipients on the list is the one in the to field. So something that might be a common practice where you work, I hope it isn't, is that, you have that same situation where you're informed of something, but instead of carbon copying your boss so that you can see that they're put in the loop, they might BCC your boss so that they're telling your boss on the sly that you were put in the loop. Which could have different moral and ethical implications based on the situation, but that's neither here nor there. It's something to think about for another day. The person who gets that email can't tell that you sent it to anyone else. I mean, this is also useful if you want to send an email to a group of people, but you don't want anyone in that group of people to get each other's address. So you can put everybody in the BCC field, and then everybody in the BCC field would get the email, but it wouldn't show any addresses. However, the last point here is something that's interesting to note, and it's something that you should note if you ever get BCC'd on an email. So if you're BCC'd on an email, you should assume that the person who sent the email didn't want someone else who received the email to know your email address or to know the other people on the list who received the email. So if you accidentally hit reply all and reply to the message, it would in turn reveal that you were BCC'd because you would come back through as a sender and have your message sent to everybody who originally received the message. So you want to respect the people, you want to respect whatever reason that the initial person had for blind copying you, whether it was good or bad intentioned, because there's probably some reason that somebody shouldn't know your email address at that point, or know that you were on the email. So by accidentally hitting reply all, you would just reveal yourself there, and that's not necessarily good in that kind of situation. So you want to be careful about the button that you hit in these types of situations. So here we have an example of just the different email addresses in the different fields. We have an email going to Brad. It's been CC'd to Maggie, but John is in the blind carbon copy field and has the subject of sensitive information. Not a great subject, but okay. And the message is, don't tell John I said so, but I think he deserves a huge raise. But John knows that Kevin said so, that Kevin told Brad and Maggie, because Kevin BCC'd John. But neither Brad nor Maggie will know that Kevin BCC'd John, that John is in on this little raise stunt, because his email address will not show up, because he was BCC'd and not CC'd or put into the to field. Something interesting to consider. So that's all I have for you for this video. I want to thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know.